All right, good evening, everybody. It is 5:30, so we are going to go ahead and get started tonight. First off, thank you everybody for joining us. We are here for the air quality informational session and public hearing on the proposed air permits for Marathon Petroleum Company and MPLX Terminals. My name is Caitlin DeVries. I'm with EGLE's Environmental Support Division, and I'll be here as your moderator as well as your hearing officer for the evening. So before we get into our informational session, this is a hybrid meeting, so we do have people attending online as well as in person. So I just want to cover a couple of housekeeping items. So first thing, for those of you who are joining us online, all lines are muted and will remain muted throughout the duration. However, you will have a time to ask a question too if you are online, and to do that, you will do #9 to raise your hand, or you
Star nine,
sorry, to raise your hand on Zoom, and we will get you unmuted. And you can also put a question into the question and answer box, and we'll get more into that in just a few minutes. For everybody here on site as well, we are recording this meeting. So we will get the recording up from this on our YouTube page and on our website in just a few days, if not tomorrow, by Monday for sure. Then everybody who registered or attended the meeting or is part of our interested parties list will receive a link to that recording as well. Another housekeeping note, just because we're here on site, we'll be talking for a little bit here. Restrooms are going to be straight out the back door here, and then emergency exits are going to be straight out the front as well as down the hallways in either direction. So I just covered this about how to ask a question. So for those online, you're going to use that *9 to raise your hand or type it into your Zoom toolbar. Here in person, we're going to use the old-fashioned way, and you just raise your hand when we get to the question and answer portion. We do have two pretty distinct portions of the evening tonight. The first part being that informational session where we'll cover a lot of the information about why we're here, the proposed project, and those type of information before we allow for that dialogue back and forth between the audience and our panelists here to get those questions answered. And then we'll get into that official public hearing portion of the evening, which will be part 2. And that's where your official comments will be on the record. And I'll talk more about that when we get closer to that portion of tonight. So again, just as I was kind of mentioning, how are things going to work? So we've got those two portions. We'll start off with that informational session. We will get through our presentation and allow for questions and answers up until about 7 o'clock or when questions are done, whichever comes first. We do have a hard out of the building tonight that I want to let everyone know, which is 9 o'clock. So that means everything packed up and out. So that is kind of we're working around that timeline, just so everybody is aware of that timeline. Once we get through that, that's when we'll swap things out and we will bring up our decision maker to get into that hearing portion of the evening. So before I introduce our panelists here as well, I want to cover a couple of our group norms for just how we like to run some meetings here. So first things, is we want to listen actively with an ear to understanding. So just make sure that we're listening and making sure that everyone's getting a chance to speak. Ask questions and request clarification if something gets said by one of our panelists that you have a question on. We're happy to answer those. Criticize ideas and not individuals. We want to just make sure that we're all being respectful back and forth. And communicate respectfully. And then lastly, take space and make space. We've got plenty of time for questions and answers. We want to just make sure that everybody who has a question that has the opportunity to get that question answered. So before we get into the agenda, I want to introduce our decision maker for the evening, which is Chris Etheridge. He's our Assistant Division Director, and I know he wants to say a couple of opening welcoming remarks. So Chris, here you go.
Thanks, Caitlin. Good evening, everyone. Chris Etheridge, one of the Assistant Division Directors for the Air Quality Division. And I just wanted to take a minute to thank you all for coming out tonight. We all have busy schedules, and it means a lot to us that you come tonight and are hopefully going to get some information to answer questions that you have. We really appreciate the opportunity to be able to share all of the decision making that we've put into this as far as the permit. But we're really looking for your questions and concerns. We've got a panel of expert folks here tonight that will hopefully be able to answer any and all questions that you might have. So thank you again for coming tonight, and I'll be up in front later.
Thank you so much, Chris. Appreciate opening remarks. So next, before we get into our session, I want to introduce our panelists here. First person I want to introduce is Andy Drury. Andy was the lead permit engineer on this proposed project. So you'll be here primarily from him about how the application was reviewed and the stuff that entails in that. I'll just work our way down the table here. The next up, we've got Jim Haywood. Jim is one of our air modelers, as well as one of our air quality meteorologists. So the modelers, they look at the projected emissions stuff. They look at what would it be outside before it's being built, because project hasn't occurred yet. So he takes a look at what those projected emissions are. And then next up, we've got Dr. April Wendling. April is the Detroit office district supervisor, and she's going to talk about what the inspections at the facility site information, being kind of the boots on the ground type of person, give you the information on what inspections and such happen at the facility. Then moving down the table, we've got Mike Deppa. Mike is our air quality toxicologist. So he looks at all of the chemicals from the project and evaluates them against our different health-based screening levels and such as they get reviewed as part of the permit application. And then last but not least, we have Amy Robinson. Amy is from our air monitoring unit. So she has expertise in our network of air monitoring stations throughout the state. She reviews all of that data and is very knowledgeable about the actual emissions, the stuff that's outside of the air right now getting evaluated at those monitors. So before I hand it over to Andy, just kind of a quick recap of what we've already been talking about how things are going to work. So I'm going to pass it over to Andy here in a second. He's going to give the informational portion of the evening about what the air quality division does, how the permit was reviewed, the permit application process, give you some of that background information on the projects that you're hearing about tonight. Then we'll proceed into that question and answer portion of the evening, again, where we'll have that dialogue that you can get your questions answered. And that can be asked to any of our panelists here. Then we'll transition into that public hearing portion where you'll get to make your official comment on the record. And then if you decide you don't want to make a comment tonight, that's totally okay. We have our comment period is open until June 11th, right? June 11th. So you'll still have time. We'll go over ways that you can make that official comment if you're not ready to do so tonight. All of the comments are weighted equally. So just saying it here doesn't make it more valuable versus doing it one of the other ways that we have available. And then, oops, went a little fast with my clicker there, apologies. Then we'll talk about where to find some other information. If you're here in the room, if hopefully you stopped by the back table there and got a bunch of the resources, including a bunch of the information that we have posted online in our Mindbender portal, which is our collective database that you can find all things air quality related, including the permit application, the proposed permit, and the project summary and information. And then lastly, we'll talk about who to contact with further questions. We'll give you the emails and contact information for our panelists if you still have some follow-up questions that you'd like answered after tonight's session. So Andy, with that, I am going to hand it over to you to get us into tonight's presentation. Your microphone should be turned on.
Hello. All right, good evening, everyone, and thank you for attending this. Windows in my way. Yeah, whoops. There we go. I'm trying to get this. There we go. All right. When we practiced there, now the window in front of all my notes. All right, so good evening, everyone. My name is Andy Drury, and thank you for attending this informational session and public hearing. I am, as Caitlin said, the lead permit engineer to review the Marathon and MPLX air permit applications. And before we talk about the applications, I'd like to go over what we do at the Air Quality Division and how the permitting process works. So the AQB is committed to protecting public health and the environment. And to do this, we use our authority under state and federal laws to regulate sources of air pollution. So we do a lot of different things, such as monitoring levels of air pollutants, looking at toxic air contaminants to protect public health, conducting inspections of facilities like Marathon and MPLX, and reviewing applications and writing permits to make sure the proposed projects comply with state and federal rules. So I'd like to go over what the proposed permits cover and what we are not able to regulate. We regulate and permit industrial sources. Additionally, we review permit applications based on what the facility is proposing. We are not able to address zoning, noise, or traffic. If you have questions or concerns about these issues, you'll want to talk to your local government. And when it comes to evaluating public comments on a permit application, it's important to hear the opinions of the residents. However, we cannot base our decision to act on an application on whether residents support or oppose the project or believe it is necessary. We evaluate a project to make sure it meets the applicable air quality rules. If a project meets those rules, we are required to issue a permit. So I'll now go over a brief explanation of the permitting process. So first, the company decides to install or modify equipment that would release air pollutants. This often requires a permit to install, called a PTI. The company then submits a permit application to the AQB through My Enviro portal. The application is then reviewed by an engineer like myself to decide if the request can meet the state and federal rules. Frequently, other air quality staff are involved to help with the review. If the state and federal rules are met, the engineer creates a proposed permit. And then if, like in this case, the proposed project of public comment, the proposed permit is posted for public comment on. And as we said, public comment is a very important part of the permitting process, which is why we're talking tonight. And once the comment period ends, we review and evaluate the submitted comments. Comments can lead to changes in the permit and the final decision. And finally, we make a decision on the proposed permit. Permit can be approved as proposed, approved with changes based on the comments, or denied. And this decision is based on whether or not what the company is requesting can meet the air quality regulations. So why do we have two applications that we're talking about tonight? Marathon and MPLX are part of the same stationary source. The facility takes crude oil and other feedstock and refines it into different products and sells those products to customers. The refinery portion is operated by Marathon, while the light products terminal portion is operated by MPLX. And while these proposed projects are not directly related, Marathon and MPLX submitted those applications within a few weeks of each other. So Marathon is proposing to make some changes to the facility as well as their current air permit conditions. These changes include upgrading an existing rail spur to allow unloading of some feedstock by rail. This would include 24 warming stations and 12 racks to unload rail cars into existing storage tanks. Marathon is proposing loading light distillates like kerosene and diesel fuel into rail cars using the existing pentane and butane rail car loading rack. Marathon is also proposing to shift some of their pentane and butane rail loading to the existing LPG rail loading rack. As discussed in the technical fact sheet, Marathon is proposing some changes to existing permit conditions, including changing the volatile organic compound or VOC emission rate or emission limit for the regular storage tanks. And they are doing this because the United States Environmental Protection Agency, referred to as EPA, they updated the emission calculation method. It's not that the emissions from the tank has changed, it's that EPA changed how to do the calculation. Marathon is also proposing to update the refinery flare conditions to match the current technical requirements. And Marathon is proposing to remove some of the sulfur recovery unit, referred to as SRU, sulfur production limits. And in order to make up for the increases from the rail car loading and unloading changes, Marathon is proposing to install enhanced controls on 3 existing storage tanks to reduce VOC emissions by 2.6 tons per year. So these controls will be boosts and socks installed on the internal floating roof support legs. Support legs go through the floating roof, providing places where VOC could be emitted. The boots seal the gaps where the legs go through the floating roof, and the socks cover the end of the lid above the roof. So MPLX loads gasoline produced at the refinery into tanker trucks, and there's 6 existing loading lanes. When the truck is filled with gasoline, gasoline vapor is pushed out of the truck. MPLX has 2 different control devices to control these emissions. The activated carbon vapor recovery system, on the VRU, is the primary control device. The vapor combustion unit, called the VC, is currently only used as a backup when the VRU is not available. So MPLX is proposing limited use of the vapor combustion unit instead of the vapor recovery unit, primarily during hot weather, so they can operate all 6 loading lanes at the same time. They would only be allowed to load 85.5 million gallons of gasoline per year when using the vapor combustion unit in order to limit emissions. The terminal's total gasoline throughput limit is 1 billion gallons per year. So let's talk about how a permit application is reviewed. When reviewing a permit application submitted by a company, the permit engineer works with other air quality staff. This work includes reviewing state and federal rules that apply to the project, evaluating proposed emissions, an air toxics review to make sure that toxic air contaminants meet our health-based screening levels, and air modeling for criteria pollutants or toxic air contaminants when needed. The goal of our review is to make sure that Marathon and MPLX's proposed projects can meet the required state and federal rules. I will now go into a little more detail about regulating pollutants. So an air pollutant is a substance released into the environment by various sources, including industrial facilities. There are 3 categories that a pollutant can fall into. The first group is criteria pollutants. This contains 6 well-studied and regulated pollutants, such as sulfur dioxide, referred to as SO2, oxides of nitrogen, referred to as NOx, carbon monoxide, or CO, and particulate matter. The U.S. EPA sets national ambient air quality standards, referred to as NAAQS, for criteria pollutants to protect public health and the environment. The releases of these pollutants must be below the NAAQS. The second group is hazardous air pollutants, known as HAPs. The current list of HAPs includes 188 pollutants which are known or suspected to cause health or environmental effects. We regulate these pollutants by applying federal rules known as NESHAPs, and we make sure that the facility will comply with these regulations. The third group is known as toxic air contaminants, referred to as TACs or TACs. These are a group of pollutants that are covered by state, and the other 2 groups fall under federal regulations. Toxic air contaminants include almost any pollutant that is not a criteria, including the hazardous air pollutants. Based on Michigan rules, our toxicologists set health-based screening levels for toxic air contaminants. These screening levels must be met by a facility. So let's go into a little more detail about toxic air contaminants and their health-based screening levels. The screening levels are designed to protect against health issues such as developing cancer or breathing problems. When we performed our review of these applications, we looked at the maximum emission rates of all toxic air contaminants affected by Marathon's proposed changes, as well as gasoline emissions from both Marathon and MPLX combined. Our review determined the releases would not violate the health-based screening levels. More detail about the toxics review can be found in the technical fact sheet. So air modeling uses computers to predict the effects on air quality. Modeling is important to the permit review because it tells us what concentrations of pollutants residents could be exposed to in the worst-case scenarios. The modeling simulates a grid of virtual air monitors surrounding the facility. This allows the highest concentration to be considered. And by worst case, I mean the highest allowed emission rates, the weather conditions, and the building downwash that cause the highest ground level impacts. For Marathon, various hydrocarbons, such as kerosene, diesel fuel, pentane, and benzene were evaluated, as well as sulfur compounds like hydrogen sulfide. Gasoline for both the refinery and the terminal was also evaluated. The modeling showed that Marathon and MPLX would be able to meet the health-based screening levels. Criteria pollutants were not modeled because the proposed projects will not change the hourly emission rates, and it's the hourly emission rate that goes into the model. So once we finish reviewing the application, we draft a proposed permit. A permit is a document with conditions that the company must comply with. The permit conditions ensure that the project operates as described in the application and the way that we reviewed it. So this slide lists some of the requirements of Marathon's proposed permit that are related to the project. There are limits on the amount of VOC from the rail car loading how much material can be loaded into the and unloaded from the rail cars, including heavy oil feedstock, light distillate, pentane, and butane. There are emission controls for rail car loading and unloading, including keeping rail car hatches closed systems for loading pentane and butane into rail cars, and submerged fill for loading distillate into rail cars. The voluntary floating roof light support light loops and socks are required to be installed on 3 tanks. Permit requires Marathon to calculate and report emissions. Records of railcar throughput are required. Marathon has to notify the APD when the new rail unloading process has been constructed and when the floating roof light controls are installed. And the permit does not allow Marathon to load light distillate into rail cars until these floating roof light controls have been installed. And this slide lists some of the requirements in the MPLX proposed permit that are related to the project. There are limits on the VOC emissions from the loading rack. There is a limit on how much gasoline can be loaded when the vapor combustion unit is used instead of the vapor recovery unit. And the control devices, the vapor recovery unit and the vapor combustion unit, have to be used when gasoline is loaded. And these controls have to be monitored and maintained to make sure they work correctly. And the gasoline throughput when using a vapor combustion unit has to be recorded. So now I'll pass it over to April, the district supervisor.
Good evening. My name is April Wendling, and I'm District Supervisor, Detroit office. Before I go on, I'd like to introduce my Assistant District Supervisor in the back room, Mr. Jeff Gorniski, the best resources we have. And I am filling some very big shoes tonight because Steve Weiss is supposed to be here, and hopefully he'll be here a little bit later. He couldn't be here right now, so I'm kind of filling in for him. Before I get started on this, I have had experience teaching at Mineral County Community College and also at U of M Dearborn. So I know how students hate having slides being read to them. So I'll let you take some time to take a look at that, and we'll come back to that and recap at the end. So I also noticed we got some younger people in here. Are you students? No? Any students in here at all? Darn, I was going to give a quiz. So maybe you're the younger one, so maybe I'll still give you a quiz. So I want to talk a little bit about the Detroit office because I'm very proud. In the last year and a half, we have just about doubled the size of our office to be able to respond to things, which we haven't been able to since I started 6.5 years ago. Right now, we got 23 people, and we, besides Jeff and myself, we've got some administrative assistants, we have inspectors, we have a stack tester, we have a technician, we have asbestos people. Oh, ladies and gentlemen, the late great Steve Weiss has just entered. So in the end, if we have specific inspection questions, I'm going to yield that to him. So he did arrive. So I was telling the truth, and he is here. So right now, we're very blessed with the district office. We have half of our office are very senior people with 20 and 25 years, and half of our office are newbies with 1.5 years or less. So we are really coming on stronger than we have been in the last few years. So we do have some. Oh, before I go on, we got to find a prize for these ladies there in the front row. And as usual, we've got plenty of things in the back, so make sure you take, that's your prizes, collect as many as you want. So we want you to do that because I know all the tricks that you fill up from the back and go forward. So maybe I'll tap into some of you from the back. Since you are younger, I'm going to pick on you. We're going to talk about inspections. So I'm going to ask you, what do inspectors do? I know.
So I work with Steve.
Okay. Well, you didn't have to reveal that, you see. Well, okay, from a marathon point of view, what do inspectors do? Okay, well, you get prizes too, because you get an A+, because inspectors determine if a company is operating in compliance with their permits as well as state and federal regulations, so very well done. We have 11 inspectors, we have 6 environmental engineers and 5 EQAs, which are environmental quality analysts.
Sorry.
That's even under, now trying to exit the building. 17 and under.
This is just building announcements, so it doesn't pertain to us. We're good, so just wanted to let everybody know.
Yes,
Okay,
good.
no. Oh, no.
Okay, and we do this by conducting inspections, getting back to inspectors, so they got the plus on that. By reviewing company reports and records, observing various air quality emission tests. I'm sure you're familiar with stack testing. Okay, good. Maybe you can, join in on that and let people know about that. And investigating complaints, which Steve does throughout the Detroit area, and a lot of our inspectors do. So, and we're able to be more responsive to that in the past because we've got more people now. So we're ramping up on that. So I'm very pleased about that. But inspection process, and Steve, you let me know if I'm wrong, it starts way before you just get on site for an inspection, because Marathon is a Title V facility, which means it has to be permitted. It has an ROP, which is a renewable operating permit, and that is renewed every 5 years. But before Steve goes out, I imagine you take a look at that each time you do an inspection. And I don't know the answer to this, so maybe how many pages is that ROP report for Marathon? Approximately 200. So before he ever goes on site, he's got to thoroughly review a 200-page report and understand what is going on there, as well as things like stack testing, and figure out what kind of things he wants to ask the company to provide records of. In addition, a lot of things you might be able to go into. So when you do show up on site, you can ask for those things. So that's a very important thing that he does. And once on site, inspectors, of course, visually inspect equipment and operations, as you would expect that they would, and assess things like visual emissions and odors, if applicable. Okay, you verify that the facility is operating as required in the permit. Again, 200 pages long, and he's going to make sure all that is being met. And obtain information on monitoring and operations, as well as reviewing company records that are required by permit and regulations. Now, Steve wasn't supposed to be here, so he did give me a statement to read at the end, and he can elaborate on that later. And it says, because Marathon is such a large and complex site, at least, and it's many more than that, 2 inspections are required to be conducted every year. Based on the most recent inspections, Marathon was found to be in compliance with their issued permits and all other applicable state and federal air pollution regulations. So with that, Caitlin, I'm going to hand it back to you, and I guess the questions can start.
Thank you, April. Much appreciated for all of that information on how our proposed project was put together, how Andy reviewed it, all of the things that the district inspectors do. We gave you a lot of information to process there. So just going to kind of let you digest that a little bit. Again, if you wanted some more of that information, we do have a lot of that. The technical fact sheets, the proposed project, the proposed permits, etc., available on that back counter. And Natalie will share out to those of you attending online the links to where we have those posted online too, so that you're able to access those. So this is where we're going to transition into our question and answer portion. If you have a question again online, you'll type in that *9 to raise your hand, or type it in the Q&A box. And then we'll just go around the room, letting everybody have an opportunity to ask a question too. If you'd like to ask a question, you just want to raise your hand and I'll bring the mic over to you and you'll get your question. Thanks, Andy. So, okay, I see a question up here up front.
My name is Wanda Lowe Anderson. I'm a resident of 48217. I'm also on Marathon's Community Advisory Panel. And I appreciate you validating the credentials of the people that are in the meeting tonight. However, I do have some questions for EGLE. And I'm layman, so there are probably some verbiage that I'm not quite familiar. I'm not an engineer, but I do have questions. The key questions I have for EGLE is related to air emission and monitoring. And I'll just go through them for time's sake. How much will VOC and NOx and SO2 emissions increase under the new permit? Will Marathon removal of sulfur limits increase SO2 emissions in a non-attainment area? What real-time air monitoring will be required during a rail car loading and unloading a heavy feedstocks? Will EGLE require fence line monitoring for benzene, VOCs, and sulfur compounds? As it relates to health and safety, what health risk assessments were conducted for pentane, butane, LPG, and heavy oil feedstock vapors? How will the switch from a VRU to a VCU at the MPLX, and I'm not going to say the whole nickname, affect local NOx and particular emissions? What protections are in place for residents during upset conditions, leaks, or flaring events? The cumulative impact is very key in this situation. How does EGLE account for the neighborhood's existing asthma burden history of violations? Will the agency conduct a cumulative impact analysis before approving the permits? And then the accountability and transparency. What enforcement mechanisms will ensure Marathon and MPLX comply with the new permit limits? Will residents have access to continuous emissions data? And then I just wanted to know, as it relates to this community, from EGLE's standpoint, what is the current health conditions that exist that would only be exacerbated through more VOCs, particulate matter, and those kinds of issues that will impact the community? So what additional pollutants will be generated by switching from vapor recovery, which is capturing, to vapor combustion? And that's my only question right now.
Okay, so you had a lot of questions in there, so we're gonna try and get some of those answered, but definitely going down the line. So first, I'm gonna pass some of those questions off to Andy here to talk about the emission stuff and what's being proposed under the new project before we get into some of the health-based stuff from Mike and any air monitoring related stuff from Amy. So Andy, if you wanna start off with those questions, that would be great.
Yeah, so for VOC and NOx, Marathon in 2024 as part of the Detroit permitting project, and also as part of the feedstock and fuels flexibility project, to offset some of those increases, they did several decreases. They replaced some heaters with ultra low NOx burners. You can see it in the dome on one of the gasoline storage tanks. They took the coker flare out of service. They did some enhanced leak detection and repair. For this project, we talked about those leg boots and things like the sport leg boots and socks. So those reductions from all of those offset the increases that they would have had. So there is no increase in NOx, there is no increase in SO2 as a result of the project. SO2, I have to look back at the papers and see it. If there are any increases, they are very small. But for NOx and VOC, I know I looked at that this morning. There are no increases as a result of this project or the Detroit permitting project. So we permitted that in 2024. Marathon took that emission analysis and they added this new project to it. They did that so that they could show that they did not separate these projects to avoid major source review. If you take them both together, they don't trigger major source review. And then those emission reductions that they've done have offset the increases. That's why in the permit conditions, they can't load the distillate into rail cars until they get those controls on those tanks installed, because that's the major source of emissions of VOC from this project.
Thanks, Andy. I'm gonna pass the microphone down here to Mike now, who's gonna try and address the questions that you had about some of the health-based concerns, and we'll hopefully dip into all of the questions that you have here. I'll let you.
Okay, thanks. So I heard a question about cumulative analysis. Well, And that's a great question because we do know that toxic air contaminants and other air pollutants like criteria pollutants, they can have additive effects and cumulative effects. Unfortunately, we don't have the authority to regulate those cumulative effects in the way that most people are expecting. That would be something that the legislature could change. And I put it, I don't know if this is the right analogy, but if you're going the speed limit, you can't get a ticket for going, too fast. So we are not allowed really to take into account or deny the permit if they're complying with all the regulations with us. That's unfortunate that, but I do know that there is legislation being considered right now. Not sure what the exact terms of it are, but there's I think part of the summary for that legislation is overburdened community, and there would be a cumulative index. But I don't know how that would be determined. I think that would probably be hashed out. And then it's political. And do we take into account the existing health burdens in the area? We don't, but there is part of the 6 criteria pollutants that Andy had mentioned, like the NOx and SOx. Those standards, the NAC standards, were calculated based on epidemiology studies, which did take into account of all the health burdens in an area. And so Detroit was one of the large cities that they did some epidemiology studies on for PM. And they determined that those standards are protective for those communities with all their health burdens. And they found the most sensitive effect. And they based the standard on a level that will not exacerbate those effects. So I don't know if that helps at all, but all the
Mike, maybe you could talk a little bit too about how like tax are reviewed and how for health-based screening,
Yeah,
et cetera, too.
Michigan has one of a very unique, maybe the only state, United States, that takes into account all toxic air contaminants. We only have like anything that could be emitted, it gets a health evaluation if it's not exempt. And there's like 39 inert substances that are exempt from toxic air contaminant definition. But we have almost 1,300 health standards for each individual toxic air contaminant. Now some of them have the same effect as other ones. So like the distillates, like kerosene and the light distillate, and those screening levels that are on our Wine Bar Road website have footnotes that you have to combine the impact for each one of those distillates because they have the same effect. So in a very limited way, it does take into account the cumulative impact. It adds up the impacts, and those impacts have to be less than a value that is determined not to cause adverse effects.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. So I guess maybe to kind of summarize that for laymen too, we're looking at the impacts cumulatively in the way that our rules allow. So it may not be as exactly what everyone's hoping for, but we have to look at it the way that our rules allow us to look at it. And they, Mike and Andy, I don't know if Andy, you had anything on cumulative impact that you wanted to add on there before we talk about some monitoring. Is there anything you want to add? Okay. So I know you had some questions about air monitoring as well. So Mike, if you could pass the microphone to Amy, and Amy, maybe you can talk about the air monitoring that is in the area and kind of what that shows for us.
Thank you. So Marathon does have 4 air monitoring sites. They monitor for SO2, total reduced sulfur, as well as VOC emissions. 3 of those sites are on the Marathon property, and 1 is at Mark Twain Middle School off of 4th Street. In addition to that, the state air quality has 11 air monitoring sites in this area. There are 3 on 4th Street from the Detroit Police 4th Precinct State Station, and then coming to this area, we have 1 in River Rouge, 1 in 48217. That's 3 more in 6 total monitors in Southwest Detroit. The one in Dearborn is at Salina Elementary School, right across from the Ford plant. So this area has the most air monitoring stations in the whole state. Each of those monitoring stations do monitor for various things, but we have a SO2 monitor nearby at the Southwest High School site. We have all air toxics at the Dearborn site, and that is about a 200 list of 200 different compounds, including benzene. And Southwest also has VOC compounds. So this area is well studied. In fact, it's nationally one of the most studied areas by many different university professors and special studies from the EPA. So there is a lot of monitoring around here to make sure that the air quality meets standards and the health-based benchmarks from the area.
Great, thanks, Amy. And then just to close the loop too here, I think I heard the question in there that you also, what monitoring are they doing on site? So I don't know if April, if you had anything that you wanted to add on that from what's in the permit and the proposed permit to any of this.
I think I said increased as a result of this new permit. Will there be increased market?
Increased monitoring, so
There,
Andy, is that part of the
No,
permit?
there will be no additional monitoring. Yeah, there is no additional monitoring required as a result of these changes. And I also wanted to point out that Marathon does fence line benzene monitoring. It's a requirement of federal regulations. That information is available online somewhere. I think Mike knows where to find it. So you can see what their levels are, and the monitoring they do shows that they are meeting the federal benzene standard. And that's ambient monitoring around the fence line.
you can also, there's a website dedicated to the Marathon Monitoring Network. You can go and get data on there. It will not contain the VOC data because it has to be sent off to a lab and analyzed. But if you go into the Michigan's new Enviro system, you can find the VOC concentrations in there for probably about 30 different compounds.
Great, thank you, Amy. Okay, question in the back here.
Good evening, everybody. Therese Landry, resident Southwest Detroit 4217. For clarification, did I hear Mr. Beth say that there's no way to utilize cumulative impact? For clarification, did you say that in Michigan under the rules?
Yeah.
Okay, back in 2010 and 12, I had the opportunity to visit EGLE and meet with Bryce Feitner and with the Sierra Club with I can't think, Mr. Van Buren. And we found that on the books in Michigan, maybe you got to go dig it up out of the library somewhere, there is a way that you can utilize cumulative impact. So go dig up some old rules, because this is what we're going to talk about. For the past 10 years, ozone levels have either equaled or exceeded the health-based ozone air quality standards set by the United States EPA. Exposure to ozone can cause a variety of severe health effects, including asthma attacks, heart attacks, and stroke. Recent studies have found that prenatal exposure to ozone can negatively impact the brain development of children while in utero. If Ms. Robinson stated that this area has been really studied, you know that we're one of the most impacted communities throughout the state of Michigan. In fact, in 2015, we were deemed, I got an announcement.
Yeah, thank you.
We were deemed the most polluted zip code after we brought in the University of Michigan School of Environment to study our community through modeling, the TRI, and even Marathon's own data and EGLE's own data to show that this community is a hot spot for pollution, and thus we have serious health impacts. The Michigan Department of Environmental Quality, Great Lakes and Energy should require Marathon and MPLX to prepare an ozone impact analysis to assess what impact proposed permit would have on the already excessive levels of ozone pollution in Detroit. Just last year and 2 years ago, we were commenting to EGLE that for them not to consider, I think June 23rd through the 25th of 2023, the ozone and impact from the wildfires. You guys utilize a monitor from 7 Mile to say that this community and the surrounding areas would now be in compliance with ozone. That does nothing for us lay people to understand. We're here being impacted because of the emissions such as VOCs, nitric oxides, and other things that contribute to the bad ozone. So in my opinion, as a layperson, not fully understanding some 200 and some pages that you guys have to review, that utilizing something further away from the area that's impacted has no significant clarification to us why you guys would allow for an increase in emissions. And then as Ms. Anderson said about the going from vapor recovery to vapor combustion, and you said there would be an increase in VOCs and other things, minimal. What do we know about minimal to us when we're in an area that is sandwiched in between common use line, ES Coke battery, Dearborn Works, and then the now shut down DTE Energy plant and the idled US Steel. When we look at all the other industries that are also emitting, and you tell us that health impacts and above the standard, cumulative impact is paramount. Then the gentleman, Mr. Dalpa, said that, let me think, I'm losing my train of thought, that cumulative impact is not under the rules of EGLE. EGLE has some leeway. The state has some leeway to create laws to be more protective of community. I suggest that you utilize that, because as you see, we're here to say that any increase would have a detrimental impact on an already vulnerable community. Also, throughout this permit application, Marathon states that the upgrades in its rail systems may allow it to decrease reliance on trucks for imports and exports to and from the facility. However, it never commits to such any reductions. So we need a commitment in the permit from Marathon that they do the truck traffic reduction. EGLE should incorporate limits on truck trips to and from the facility to make this commitment binding and enforceable. Okay, Michigan law requires that before issuing any permit, EGLE must determine whether the proposed permit will violate the Michigan Environmental Protection Act, which broadly prohibits the pollution, impairment, or destruction of air, water, or natural resources, prohibits the impairment of the public trust in these resources. EGLE has not performed these analyses as required by the Michigan Environmental Protection Agency. Therefore, the Michigan Department of Environment, Great Lakes and Energy must conduct an analysis to determine whether Marathon's proposed permit will result in pollution, impairment, or destruction of the air, water, or any other natural resource or the public trust in these resources. With that being said, when you talk to us about increases, we had to allow, as us being lay people, to depend on the generosity and the benevolence of lawyers to review this permit. In their reviewing of the permit, it said sulfur dioxide will increase 5.7 tons per year. And then projected emissions increase from MPLX for sulfur dioxide will increase by 3.29.9. Totaling project increase tons per year equal 38.6. Nitric oxide, 30 from Marathon, 35.9 tons per year, and from MPLX, 7.5, totaling 4.3 increase. Both VOCs, 7.8 tons per year, and from Marathon, MPLX will increase by 1.2, and then that equals a total of 39. And when you talk about monitoring and fence line monitoring, we have a monitor at Mark Twain, yes, but the monitors will not monitor some of these emissions. They will only utilize the 7 criteria. So we're talking about things that will really impact the vulnerable community. So we would like the EGLE to take a stance for once for the people. We may not understand the legalese, scientific data and stuff, but we know one thing. The impacts from any industry and increase from any industry will harm us. As you talk about in utero, our children being impacted, our children are being born with asthma. Some of our children are being born with cancer. Many of us in this room are cancer survivors. So when you talk about lay people, we're talking from our heart, from feeling and health impacts. But what you guys are doing, you're talking about your scientific data that is impacting the human body. When you have to look at it and study it long term, the impact of all these chemicals, which Mr. Drury just stated were carcinogens. I was a little late, I didn't see the, but he stated several of the emissions are carcinogens. That means cancer. So I end with that saying we need MDEQ to go back to the drawing board, reconsider, and then for once, because in my lifetime, you guys have only denied one permit, and that was from when we talked about the pet coke. But other than that, Comuse Line, EES Coke, Dearborn Works was the Ford Rouge, Marathon have always got a PTI granted by this body. Thank you.
Well, there was some stuff in there. I just want to remind everybody we're still in the Q&A, and those sounded like some really good comments for you to make on the record, Teresa. So, but we're still in the Q&A portion, so I just want to remind everybody of that. But I want to give Andy a chance to talk about some of the, if you wanted to talk about any of the increases of what your review showed or anything on that before we move on to any other questions.
Yeah, I forgot about the vapor combustion portion of your question. So currently, the permit does not restrict Marathon from using the vapor combustion unit, Marathon MPLX. If their vapor recovery unit suffered a catastrophic failure, they could run that vapor combustion unit 8760 all year long. There's no restriction on that in the permit. That's why when they've applied for this permit to use it on a limited basis instead of vapor recovery unit, that's why there is a throughput limit on that, how long they can do that. And that's there to limit the emissions from the vapor combustor. That limit was picked based on how much they've actually used it in the past. So they do use it and they have used it. And so the permit limits their use to what they've done before. So it's not allowing an unlimited use of it unless there was a catastrophic failure of the vapor recovery unit. So that we did look at that part. You talk about reduced trucking. We have no legal authority to regulate trucking. I know you don't want to hear that. It's true. We have zero legal authority to regulate trucking. You talked about the act and doing these assessments and analyses. The way we do that is through the rules that are on the books. So we go through these rules, we evaluate them, and if the project meets those rules, we are required to issue the permit. We have no legal choice. The only way those can be changed is if the legislature authorizes changes to what we can do. We can only do what we have legal authority to do. I know that frustrates a lot of people here in the audience and also up here at the table, but that's the world we live in. We can only do what we have legal authority to do. And I know Teresa, we've heard this before about denying permits. If it meets the requirements and the rules, we have to issue it. And we've had cases where we have told the company that their permit's not gonna meet the rules. They don't want it denied, so they withdraw the application. So there are cases where we would deny it, but they withdraw it instead, because having a permit denied looks bad. So they withdraw it instead, and, we can't force them to leave the permit with us and get it denied. If they want to withdraw it, that's their right, they can do that. So that's what I had, I don't know if there's anything else.
Great, thanks, Sam.
Why do they have to, why are they requesting to lift the limits? If you have a standard and they already have a limit, why are they asking to lift the limits? That means if they lift the limits, that means they can increase pollution. So why are they asking to lift the limits?
You
Yeah,
repeat the
let me go
question.
to-
Yep, well, let me get you the microphone so you can repeat the question, and then we'll get to your question, and then I know there's some hands up on the other side of the audience, so just want to repeat that.
When I briefed over the application, it said Marathon is requesting to lift the limits.
Yeah, the sulfur production limits.
Well, if they already have a standard and they're meeting that, why the request to lift? Because when you say lift, that means open up so then they can make it higher. So why? That's my question. Why do they need to lift the limits?
Well, this chart explains that somewhat. So on the left-hand side there, 6308 and 6308D on the bottom, those are the permits for the Detroit Heavy Oil Upgrade Project that we issued, and I think that started up around 2012. So the green bar, the darker green bar on the left, is what their sulfur production limit was for the new sulfur recovery plant that was installed as part of that upgrade. The light green bar is what they expected the sulfur dioxide emissions to be. They did a good job of way overestimating the emissions for that application, which is a good thing. That's what we want them to do. We want to look at the worst case. So then they started operating that, and then we have data from 2013 through 2021, what their actual sulfur production was, what the actual emissions are. So the emissions are a whole lot lower than they anticipated when they first did that permit. So then we have here at the far right, their projected production of sulfur, and the projected sulfur dioxide emissions based on that. So that's part of the reason they're asking for that, is that initially the estimate of emissions before the plant was ever built, and these are not like a boiler that you know what the emissions are going to be. These sulfur recovery units are pretty specialized, and it's not something you just buy off the shelf. So you don't really know what it's going to do until you build it. So they guessed high on the emissions. They built it, discovered the emissions are a lot lower than they had expected. And so that's part of the reason that can be relaxed, if they can do that. One of the things, if you look at that 6308D, that green bar is 88 tons per year of sulfur dioxide. So that was the initial limit on just that new sulfur recovery plant. In 2016, we issued a permit for their Tier 3 fuels project. And in that part of that permit, they took a limit of 88 tons per year that covers both of the sulfur recovery units plus 4 other emission units at the plant. So they have a limit on sulfur dioxide emissions that actually covers a whole lot more stuff than that first one did. So we think that they can lift that limit because the emissions aren't going to be higher than what we've looked at before. They overestimated emissions, which is good. We want people to do that because we want to look at the worst case. And they want to do it too, because they don't want to guess here, build it, figure out the emissions are here, because then they get into compliance issues and we cite them violations and, a whole lot of things happen. So we want them to overestimate so we can look at that. Part of that with the control devices at the loading rack. Their VOC emission limit is 7.5 milligrams per liter of gasoline loaded. They test those and they test routinely at 2 milligrams or less. So, and we have asked this question before, can you lower that number so it looks better? No, they don't want to. They don't have to. They can have that limit, but their actual emissions are much, much lower. So when you look at, I think I have it here. So this is the modeling. This is the one from this year. This is one from 2 years ago. When you look at that 20 line, that's like 3 times, 2.5 to 3 times higher than what their actual emissions are based on their testing. So we look at what's allowed, and most of the time, the actual emissions are less than what's allowed. Well, they're not asking for more emissions. They're just asking to be able for the loading rack to use the vapor combustion control device. And we looked at that, we did the modeling to make sure that it meets the rules.
Great, so I'm gonna get to the question hand over here that I saw.
He's asking why they were asking for more.
Yeah, and then you said they're not going to increase more?
Not on the loading rack, because that's what these are about.
Okay, but they're asking to lift the limit.
On the sulfur recovery units.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah, I know, it's confusing, and that's why at the end of the fact sheet, there's those several pages of tables of what changed in the permit conditions. Because the conditions are like 100 pages long. I didn't expect anybody to read through all that, and most of it is just carried forward. It doesn't have anything to do with the changes, it's just what the permit says. Because the permit's big.
Great, thanks, Andy. Question over here.
Yes, I'm gonna, throw off her questions and Teresa also, but I'm trying to understand. I wanna know, will Marathon and Eagle and others with the proper permits and, authorization from the city and state consider a monitoring group of certain ages, to track the water, air, and human effects of such pollutants, prior to the installation of the vapor recovery unit and during 2 to 5 years of the installation to see the effects on humans of all ages in 24217, the soil quality and the air quality. Some of these pollutants are also affecting our homes, our roofs, and we wake up every morning with the smells. And Marathon has did a lot. They have gave us air units, different kind, and they have communicated with us. But a lot of these people in here are older like me, and some of the younger people, they don't understand what you guys are saying. All I am worried about the human effect of this. And please, could we have some kind of website or letters sent in the mail to show us what's going on at certain times, like I said, prior to the installation, 2 to 5 years after the installation, and therefore after. All of this, everybody is saying is good, but maybe 10, 15, 20 of these people in here don't understand half of what you're talking about. And that's all, that better be known in layman terms.
Yeah, so great questions there. So I think there's a few different parts that we can kind of talk about on that. So Mike, maybe if you can talk a little bit about some of the health such stuff on there, and then kind of the second point of your question, maybe Andy can talk a little bit more about kind of the installation, or April to talk about the installation, and if there's any notification requirements out to the public on any of that as part of the permit. So Mike, if you want to go first, that would be great. Talk about any of the health type of stuff.
Well, so I mentioned that we don't take into account the existing health of the community. But that doesn't mean that we didn't evaluate it, or that we don't have any way of looking at it. There's a couple things that help understand that the air pollution is not causing health problems in the area. One of those is, as mentioned before, that there's air monitoring data, so that we measure the air for like benzene, formaldehyde, metals, and whatnot. And those are all within acceptable levels as far as health benchmarks, like benzene causes cancer. And so Ms. Robinson has benzene data, the highest values that were measured, and the average over the year, and then multiple years. And the benzene value has been consistently below the health standards.
So maybe Mike, too, on that, you could explain kind of what you mean by a health benchmark, because that might not be a term that people are as familiar with as well. So maybe you could just explain that a little bit further by what you mean when we're evaluating them against the health benchmarks.
So when I, other toxicologists create one of these health benchmarks, they look at, studies done in humans, but sometimes they have to rely on animal data because you can't, use, it's just, we just don't know to control for all the different things that humans are exposed to. So we, the health studies for benzene, are actually done in, occupational settings where people have been exposed to benzene. And they found levels that were below, like if you go down low enough, there's no effects. So that's just one instance where you can set a health benchmark that is low enough that you don't expect to see any health effects.
Great, thanks, Mike. Yeah, well, and we're gonna answer the second part of the question here, and then we'll get back to more questions from the audience. Annie, I don't know if there was anything she asked about notifications to the public about installation of any new equipment. So is that any part of the permit that there will be a notification sent in? They can check that in my Enviro portal at all for installations of the projects.
Yeah, Marathon's required to notify us when they install the controls on the floating roof. They're required to notify us when they finish the installation of the feedstock rail unloading. And those notifications will be available in my Enviro. Once they submit them and we look at them, they become public. I know there's a lot of stuff in my Enviro, and if you have questions, call us. I mean, don't call me, I'm not an expert in my Enviro, but you can call me and I'll find somebody who can find the information for you. So those will be available publicly once that's done.
And we do have a training series available online for kind of how to navigate my Enviro, because I know it's a new system for a lot of people as well. So, question over here.
Yes, my name is Al Bates, and you said occupation, exposure on occupation, which means that the person is only there for 8 hours. Okay, we live it. Okay, so we have a higher concentration than an 8-hour stay. So how can you base what you're recommending on 8 hours? What about the other 16?
Great question. Mike, maybe you can kind of explain how we take those studies that are looking at occupational health studies and extrapolate those on to look at the 24-hour exposure.
Yes. So the benzene value, we our value of it's 0.1 micrograms per cubic meter on an annual average. That's our health-based screening group. That is based on a long-term exposure. So they assume they've done the and it takes they assume a 70-year exposure.
Yes, 8 hours.
Well, so they take into account the number of hours a day that the person has been exposed to, and they extrapolate that out to 70 years. But the studies are, let's say, for somebody that's been working at that facility for 20 years, and so that they have that long-term exposure. And it's not just the peak exposures. Now there are limits for short-term benzene exposures also. Those are, though we also make sure that the company is not emitting above those short-term exposures, because those can cause like respiratory issues, and they call those acute effects. But the long-term effects have been extrapolated out to 70 years. And each time you go further out, like a longer period, you have to decrease the value to make sure that it's low enough to protect people that could only be exposed possibly 20 years, but then 30 years later, you don't even see cancer until it's had enough time to develop in your lungs. So they watch those people for that length of time. So like, let's say there's an 8-hour exposure to 10, let's say milligrams per cubic meter. They would take into account, they divide it by 3 because there is an 8-hour period. So they divide it by 3 to get 3 8-hour periods in a day, and then 40 hours in a week compared to how many other, there's a total number of hours per week. And then they extrapolate that even down further to get out to 70 years.
Yeah, but you're still short on the hour.
So really kind of, I guess, Mike, to help summarize this, they're doing the math out to project what the exposure would be for 24-hour basis. So they're using that 8 hours kind of as a starting point, and then using the hours in the day and the exposure limits and levels, and doing that math out to represent what a 24-hour a day multi-year exposure would be when he's talking about that extrapolation out to figure out what that level was, because that level will go down for what's safe to be exposed at. There's a lot of math. I know it's very.
I mean, think about it. If you're exposed to it for a longer period of time.
Yep.
Daily. And yearly, weekly, monthly, and you're telling me that the numbers that's going to accumulate in your body are going to go down?
Mike, do you wanna?
I mean.
So we're talking about exposure. We're talking exposure limit versus.
That's snowball going down the hill. It starts off small. By the time it gets down to the bottom of the hill, it's huge.
So maybe you could try to kind of explain how you're talking about that extrapolation out a little bit more. And then I do want to get to some more questions in the audience, because we do have to move on to the second portion here at 7, just so we make sure that we're out of the building on time, because we want to be conscientious to our Kennedy Center partners here. So Mike, is there anything you want to kind of add to that before we move on to another question from the audience?
Well, it does, the averaging time is not as straightforward as it seems, but it does get, each time you lengthen the averaging time from like 8 to 24 hours annual to 70
what
years.
averaging time means?
Like the 8-hour averaging time, so like the occupation of the worker would be exposed to an 8-hour average. Yeah, let's say it's just try to do the math here. Let's say it's 9 micrograms per cubic meter. Well, that's for 8 hours. But if you average it for a 24-hour average, their 24-hour average is only 3, because you divide that by 3. So each time the standard goes down. So to protect that for that 8-hour.
So you're saying it's becoming more protective.
It's becoming more protective. And then when you add in the weeks, the years, and the 70 years, it's real, the standard that keeps going down and down and down. So that it's way more protective than just an 8-hour exposure.
Andy, did you want to add something to that? And then I'm going to get to the question here in front too.
Yeah, I'm not a toxicologist, so I don't understand all this, but I think what Mike's saying is that if the worker's protective level is 10, when you look at someone who's exposed in the community all the time, that number is like 1. So the number that you'd use to protect the public is much, much lower than the number that you would use to protect a worker, because the public is exposed much longer than the worker is. I think that's kind of what you're saying.
Yeah, they're sensitive individuals.
Okay. Next question here in the middle here.
Yes, hi, my name is Carla Squires. I've been in this area since 1970. Just this morning, I opened up my windows, early to, air the house out. I immediately had to close them up because I smell oil. It's at night. I can no longer sit on my porch. It's sad, because what I'm going to say is not to be offensive, but it's a fact. A lot of you guys don't live out here. We live out here, we breathing this stuff daily, hourly, you hear me? It's sad. I have chronic issues. I have to sleep with a air purifier, a humidifier. Yeah, Marathon gave us a lot of stuff. And we thank them for that. But we wondering, is that because of what they're getting ready to do now? I said what I said. But the thing is, it's not right, the bottom line. We are humans. We're not animals, we're not lab rats. We live here and it's affecting us. I've had family members that die of cancer. Nothing's been done. It's sad. That's all I gotta say. I'm a layman. I don't know about all these numbers. All I know is I can't hardly breathe, okay? And it's sad. And to add to it, it's not right. It's not right. I'm retired and I can't even rest. I can't go on my porch. I done worked all my life, root steel. I've been in all that mess before. It's not right. I have no peace because I love to sit on the porch and I can't.
Great, thank you so much for sharing that. Okay, couple more questions here in the front.
Okay, so first of all, my name is Amelia Sharp. I've lived in this area since 1955. Okay, and so I was here before Marathon was here. Okay, I'm still here. I really don't plan on going away. I own my home. And I live in the side where it is being bought. Homes are being bought by Marathon if you so choose to. And because the homes that are being bought by Marathon, those homes are demoed. And what is being put in there that's going to add to what they're talking about wanting to do? Because if the monitoring only covers a certain amount of chemicals, because I do believe everybody here knows that some chemicals got put in these homes that may have came from someplace else. And were they checked? So I'm concerned, my biggest concern is what is going to be added, what's going to happen now, because it's just been added into the ground across the street from me, the next block. Those trucks are not supposed to be on my streets. They're not, but they're coming through because they're demoing the houses. My street is horrible. Now, you talk about you can't sit on your porch. I'm on Liddesdale. I see marathons, what's coming out in the air. I can look at, I can hear when they're exposing something that I don't really know. I hear what you're talking about. I got a lot of knowledge of what you're talking about. It's just now you're giving me something else. I'm 71 plus years old. I don't know what and what's going to happen. I'm in doggone good health though. And I take care of my body. But if you keep putting stuff in the air and in the ground, I plan on being 100. I don't know what this permit is all going to do, but I got homework. And I'm going to guarantee you, I'm going to go through there and I'm going to look at every doggone thing about this permit because I need to know. I don't have any children out here. I have a lot of kids that I can claim, but I don't have any personal. And I'm gonna tell you, I'm very glad. I love kids, but I'm very glad. I wouldn't want my child to grow up out here. But I own my own home. Taxes is clear. And I just want to know why you keep wanting to do something in this area. And then you're talking about our health. And you said it's not going to do too much because it's going to impact the person that's actually working on the site. I understand that, especially when I retire. I understand that. But what I'm saying is, why do you want to keep doing things? It's like, let's try this, let's try that, let's try that. But I also want to mention something. I'm sad that my cousin couldn't be here. I'm quite sure a lot of you know my cousin is Vincent Mark. His father, my uncle is in the house. I don't know if you noticed, I kept looking down at my phone, but I don't know whether I'm gonna get a call, and it's gonna be over. So I just want to know how deep this permit, if approved, is going to impact us even more. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing. Andy, is there anything you wanted to mention about the additions? She asked about the additions for the project. I'll just make sure I get to your question that you had, but I appreciate you sharing that with us.
Yeah, everything,
Everything proposed for these projects is inside the existing fence line. I don't know of anything happening outside of Marathon's existing fence line right now. If they want to do something outside the fence line, we'll be back here again.
Tell me, did this one die or it's
It might have died. That's the key. Yeah.
I'll trade it out, but I know this gentleman back here, you had a question I want to get to you.
Cedric Jones, good evening, everybody. Conflict. Touch on the thing. Today, talking about. Sir, I want to let you know. I'm not sure if you ever smelled a raw egg before. It's like an odor around here. Everybody is got to tell you the same thing. Everybody can be wrong. It's an odor that comes out. Who knows when it's gonna happen? Comes at different times. Sometime on the weekend when you guys at home or on your boat, wherever you be at. So to say these things don't happen, everybody need to stand up and say they do. Everybody can't be wrong. What are you gonna do about it? Sound like you're gonna let them do some other things. Thanks.
Thank you for that question. You talked about odors here, so I'm going to give April the opportunity to talk about how we would address, the district office would address odor concerns.
Okay, well, we've got an expert in the room with Steve that has answered how many odor complaints in this area. As I said earlier, we were quite short-staffed for a long period of time. We've just ramped up with that, and so we have, especially our newer, younger people getting out there and answering things as quickly as we can. Many times we get out, and even if we get out quickly, you know, we go up, we go down, we check meteorological data. It's quite an extensive process that we go through. And a lot of times, even if we get out there quickly, an odor can dissipate, can go away rather quickly. So it's something that it's very hard for us. We have to build a case on. And
Yeah, everybody in this room, as much case you need.
I know we have to make that evaluation in order to.
Can't believe what I'm telling you.
I wish, well, I do believe you.
We all
That's not, that I know, I do believe you. But we have to have that evidence. I understand.
Come on, you know, periodically then, you'll see.
And we do send our people out on surveillance, even if we don't have complaints. We do that. We now are, so like I say, we have ramped up and we have people with, we know if there's problems in a particular area that they are regularly going out to those areas.
Is there a way we can take air samples?
Yeah. So I do also want to mention, you mentioned like when we're on weekends and evenings, we do have our PEAS line, our emergency alert system that is manned 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. So you can always call that number. We have that on the slide, our PEAS number. On the slide. Yeah, if you want to, I have it. Yep, we have that information in the back, on magnets and such for you to call that number, but it is manned 24/7, and someone will answer that phone and get out there for those odor complaints or any other complaint that you have, because we do take those seriously. So I know you've had your hand up before. I want to get to you too.
So I have a question. So Mr. Dippa indicated that even though you don't use the data, you have access to data about the impact and how it impacts the citizens of the Tri-City zip codes. if you have access to that, and I know it doesn't, we said it doesn't impact if you're gonna approve their permit or not, but that right there should be proof enough, as Ms. Blanchard said, we've been deemed the most polluted area in the country, and like I said, I'm sure you don't want your family and your kids and grandkids living here, and you don't wanna live, I got a couple empty houses on my block, come on down. You don't wanna, you don't wanna do that. So I'm sure that if you see that, and I don't, somebody working in the plant or whatever for 8 hours or 10 hours or whatever, in covered gear or whatever, we're exposed to it. We're walking out to it. So you see it and then you're saying that, but you can't use it. So it's like, you're looking at it, it's like, well, somebody was done and they got their finger on the trigger. I can't do nothing about it. I can't call 911, but we are here, like we said, we're the citizens, we're living in this and it's impacting us and we're fighting. We're here because, we're caring, we're asking for help. So why can't, or if you personally can't use it as a government agency, shouldn't you be partnering with or giving somebody else or showing up to push to help us? Giving them time, this is information here about this impacting these three cities that's mostly minorities. And we are the ones are getting impacted by this and nothing is being done. And it's not that because we're not, and thank goodness, the people here and Miss and Teresa, thank God for her. But this is what I'm saying. We're just asking, just because you don't use the information, you mean EGLE can't go, hey, this other area, this information, I'm looking at it, can we, share this information for some help? That's all I'm, is that possible?
Great, thank you for that question. Mike, I'm gonna give you an opportunity.
Yeah, thanks for mentioning that the monitoring values actually are used, not all like the total reduced sulfur or the hydrogen sulfide that smells like rotten eggs. That's not used. It's used in not the existing concentration, but the incremental impact from sulfur emission points at the facility. Those have to be below our screening level for hydrogen sulfide, which are health-based protective. Those don't stop the odors though, because the odor threshold is pretty high. So you're going to smell it before it actually causes a health effect. It's gonna bother you, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's causing a health effect. But there's other compounds like the 6 criteria pollutants that we do take into account. The Jim, when he does his modeling to make sure that they're not exceeding the national ambient air quality standards, he takes into account the existing concentrations of like ozone, PM, NOx, SOx, and carbon monoxide, and all the 6 of those. So we do take into account existing air pollution, and the addition of whatever Marathon is doing, so that it keeps below that standard.
Great, thank you, Mike. I just checked in, we don't have any questions online, so we're gonna take one more here in the audience, and I saw this lovely lady here in the red.
Just have a question because I've listened to what you're saying and she's right. You've given a lot of information that's technical, scientific, but it's not relevant to people on the average. For the average person, it's not relevant. But I do want to ask you, you mentioned about the odor and you said that it wasn't necessarily impacted, but what about the micro matter? There's micro matter that's coming in with the air. It's not just the odor. It's more than that. And you can tell in any given morning where you have film or whatever you want to call it on your car, on your house, on your porch, on your chairs and everything. So it's more than just odor, it's that. And you're judging by the odor only when in fact it's more than that. So I'm in agreement with why are you keep doing these? Why do you keep adding more things to it? What is it? Is it an AI thing? Is it a government thing? Is it that they don't care about anything? I mean, where's the direction coming from? And then you say that you're a government agency, but you don't have authority to do things. You don't have authority to make a difference. That's where I'm concerned about that. But it's more than just the air quality. It definitely is. There's matter in it.
Yeah, thank you for that. April, or I'm not sure if there's anything more you wanted to add about that for
Well,
complaint.
I wanted to give people the number to the PEAS line. Please use our PEAS line. If you've got something to take notes with, or please do. That's our pollution emergency alerting system, PEAS, PEAS. And that number is 800-292-4706. Again, that's 800-292-4706. And that is 24/7 that we can take.
Some magnets with that are getting passed
Oh,
around.
you're
They are
passing
also-
them out, thank you.
They're also on the air quality index magnet and a bunch of the other handouts that we have open in the back too. For that. So I'm just-
And online, all you have to look up is Michigan PEAS.
And it'll pop right
And
up.
it will pop, that number will pop right up.
So we are at 7 o'clock and we do have to transition over to the public hearing portion of the evening. So we are gonna just take a quick 2 to 3 minute break here so we can reset and get our decision maker up here. And then get your comment cards for anybody who had mentioned that they would like to. Any comments that we want, and I do want to just point out that we have all of our monitoring data in our network review out on the back page, and our network monitoring plan is still open for comment as well. If you want to request, add any comments to our network plan. So it's a couple minute break and we'll start here with comments. Okay, so if people are still having some conversations, that is great. We love that. We definitely have staff that are here to still answer your questions. But we do want to move into the formal hearing portion of the evening. Natalie, are we on live online? Okay.
Yeah.
So as we get into the formal public comment portion of the evening, I just kind of want to cover what the comment period entails. So as we mentioned before, the comment period started several weeks ago and is still open until June 11th. But you might be wondering, what should you be making your comment about? So we welcome comments of any type, comments related to how the permit was written, what regulations are included, and how conditions are set up and will have the greatest impact on the outcome of this action. Comments about specific changes may also be more effective. For example, a comment saying fix all the typos may not be as effective as saying exactly what typos you are finding and need to be fixed. Comments outside of the scope of the proposed permit decision cannot lead to changes in the final permit if approved. We cannot take into consideration whether a community is in support or opposition of the action, and can also cannot make changes to things outside of the scope of our authority, things such as noise, traffic, and zoning. After the hearing portion, I'll go over additional ways to find additional information and give you that contact information once again. So again, we're in that official hearing portion, and I do have an opening statement that I need to read before we call on those of you who have requested to make a comment. I did receive the comment cards from those of you who requested to make a statement, so we'll take those in order. Once we get through those, we will open it up to anybody else that would like to make a comment. So good evening and welcome to this public hearing. My name is Caitlin DeVries, and I'm with Michigan Department of Environment, Great Lakes and Energy, EGLE, and I will be the hearing officer tonight. Chris Etheridge, Air Quality Assistant Division Director, is the decision maker for this permit application. Listening to your comments this evening, you will be considering all comments before making a decision. This hearing is related to a request from Marathon Petroleum Company located at 1001 South Oakwood Boulevard, Detroit, Michigan, and MPLX Terminals LLC located at 12700 Toronto Street, Detroit. Marathon is requesting to install equipment for unloading heavy oil feedstock from cars to load light distillate into rail cars using existing pentane and butane rail load rack, to load light distillate into rail cars in the existing liquefied petroleum gas, and to change some permit conditions. MPLX is requesting to use the vapor combustion unit control device instead of the vapor recovery unit control device for a limited amount of time. The Air Quality Division regulates sources of air pollutants to minimize adverse impacts on public health and the environment. The law governing those responsibilities is Part 55 of the Natural Resources Environmental Protection Act. Before the company can install, operate any new equipment, it must obtain a permit that meets the requirements of Michigan's air quality laws. This means the equipment must be capable of meeting state and federal emission standards, including health-based standards. The proposed permit must also contain conditions that include emission limits and specific ways of operating the equipment and to ensure those standards are met. The purpose of tonight's hearing is to allow anyone interested in the proposed permits to provide information we can use in deciding whether to approve the permits or if there are additional issues to consider. The proposed permits are still draft permits. This does not mean a decision has been made. Instead, it reflects an initial technical review of the proposal. We hope having the details of the draft permits will help you provide comments. Everything in the draft permits remains open for comment and further consideration, including whether the permits will be granted at all. As we review comments, we can only use the information you provide to make changes if it is within our authority. For example, comments about local zoning, truck traffic, and noise cannot be considered as part of the decision. Some of you may want to simply express your support or opposition to the proposed projects. We are happy to note your position, but please understand the department is, by law, not allowed to base our decision on whether there is widespread support or opposition to the proposed projects. This hearing is being recorded, and your comments will be part of the information we consider in making a decision. The public comment period began on April 29 and will end at midnight on June 11, 2026. Additional comments or information may be submitted via written or verbal comment during this hearing by email or by voicemail. After the public comment period closes, all written and verbal comments will be reviewed. All significant air quality related comments will be considered, at which point the decision maker makes a final decision. The decision maker may deny the permits, approve as drafted, or approve with amendments. If approved, the decision will specify which provisions of the draft permits, if any, have been changed in the final permits and the reasons for the changes. In all three scenarios, all interested parties, including everyone on the original mailing list, anyone who provided comment during the public comment period, and/or attended the public hearing, will be directly notified of the decision. The mailing will include a letter from the decision maker regarding the decision and, if applicable, the approved permits. Please recognize our staff are here tonight to provide a fair opportunity for you to express your views on the proposed projects and listen to your comments. As a reminder, you do not need to comment tonight to have your comment to be considered. You may submit a written comment at any time during the comment period via US Post or email, or you may call in a comment to the public comment voicemail. I will go over how to do that after the hearing. Those of you who have joined us online may submit your comment in writing tonight by typing the word comment into the question box. We will limit your comment time to 3 minutes. If you are speaking, I will let you know when you have 30 seconds left. I will begin by calling the names of the people who have indicated they would like to make a verbal comment tonight. Once we get through that initial list, anyone else who would like to make a comment will be able to do so. Even if you have not already indicated you would like to make a comment when you registered for the meeting. So I have a list of those who would like to make a comment, and one more here. You, Natalie. So I'm gonna read off a couple of names. If you want to make a line up here by Ariana, who is with us, she has the microphone here, and she will give the microphone to you to make your comment. So the first person I have up is Jeffrey D. Holmer.
That's your name.
Holmes. Apologies if I'm misreading your names. Okay, if he is left, I move on to the next person, Linda Gatlin. And then Linda will be followed by Michelle Glenn.
Amy, I live walk away right off Safe.
If you could hold the microphone right up to your.
I live right on.
Perfect, thank you.
Right south on Shaker, and it's right near Marathon. I can look out the door and see Marathon.
If you could also speak your name and your affiliation before you start, that would be great.
Oh, Linda Gatlin, and I'm a member here, Southwest 48217, and a member of Southwest Block Clubs here. I just was asking for a monitor closer to, we live right at Marathon, and we don't have a air monitor to monitor because we live so close. I can't even smell, whatever. I don't even smell it anymore. Because live right, I guess this took away my sense of smell. So I was just asking if we could have a monitor close by, because I'm just a block right off Shaker, the first house off Shaker, the next street over from 4th Street, right there. Marathon is right over there. Look at it, So just need one closer because the monitors that are out here are not, like say Mark Twain is down the street there. And I know another one, I knew my Urban Church, they had one over there, but we need one because we're basically neighbors to Marathon, because they live so close. So I talked to Amy, so I told her about what we need. Thank you.
Great, thank you for your comment. Next up, we have Michelle Glenn.
I am Michelle Glenn. I live on the Littlestown area, on this side of Littlestown. I have a couple of things, and I'll reiterate what I already stated, and that is that if you consider increasing whatever it is that they're trying to do in order to expand their business, whatever that is, what you're doing is allowing that matter, not only the air, but also the green things, the trees, the grass, the plants. People grow gardens out here, and have animals out here. And everything around us is being impacted by it. It's not just the human aspect of the air breathing, although that makes a difference. All that green stuff also produces oxygen, which means that that's not even effective to eliminate whatever things that they're using supposedly to clean the air isn't working because too many people are getting sick. I can't imagine having asthma attacks in the summertime. It doesn't make sense to me. Asthma in the summer, asthma in the spring, asthma in the fall, asthma in the winter. It doesn't make sense. And I'm not the only one, children, people, adults, that we're having that. So for that reason, I would like to say reconsider what you're thinking about doing in terms of authorizing them to even do that. Because it's more than just air. It's more than just the air. It's everything around us. So that's what my commentary was on that. Thank you.
Great, thank you for your comment. The next two commenters I have up are Amelia C. Sharp, followed by Teresa Landra.
Hi, y'all again. Okay, my question is.
Could you state your name and any affiliation you have for the record as well?
Amelia Sharp.
Thank you.
And my question is, the actual sites of the rail where they're going to be unloading and loading, will it be by 4th Street and Pleasant, or is it going to be by Schaefer and 4th Street, like the back side of the freeway where the Kennedy Center is? That's what I want to know, because I'm in between that. And if, I'm going to say it's not going to happen, but if something happens, an emergency happens, and we may have to evacuate because we can't be there, I just want to know where those actual boarding and letting it be taken somewhere else is going to be at, located at.
Great, thank you for your comment. Just as a reminder, this is the public comment period, so we won't be able to respond to your questions. This comment for the question, but that might be a question you could get answered from staff outside when we're done with the hearing portion. But next up I have to comment is Teresa Landrum, followed by Wayne Brown.
You go first. Yeah, you can see how you.
Okay, Teresa Landry, Southwest Detroit, 4207 resident. I am in opposition to Marathon and MPLX's permit to change from use the oh God, I got this wrong. To go, I'm in opposition to Marathon and MPLX request to utilize the vapor combustion until pollution control equipment, use it more frequently. What will happen is there will be an increase. We definitely know that. I don't care how minute it may be. Marathon and MPLX projects have the potential to increase emissions for a number of pollutants, including volatile organic compounds, nitrogen oxides, and sulfur dioxides. Any increase will have an impact on this community. We already talked about us being a community that is overburdened with industry sandwiched in and the health impacts. But I wanted to say something about a comment. I know it can't go on the record, but it was about benzene. According to the CDC and according to the American Lung Association, in regards to benzene, at what level, the question was, would benzene be harmful? They said because benzene is a known human carcinogenic, no absolute safe level of exposure exists. So following up from Mr. Bates' question and comment, any exposure, and our exposure has been more than 40 years of all these chemicals, and nobody's taking into consideration the cumulative impact. So those are my comments. I oppose it because any increase would have a detrimental impact on this community. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Next commenter I have is Wayne Brown, followed by Simone Segovic.
I just want to make a brief comment. Us that live here in 48217.
You can speak into the microphone, that would be great.
Is
So we
it-
can hear you.
speak?
Thank you.
Okay, again, us that live in the 48217. That's been here over a period of time. The gas in the air, we can't escape it. The damage is done. What it does, when it rains, it goes down into the soil. I heard y'all mention that the soil, well, that's what kills things that grow. We ain't talking about the things that walk around here, because that's us. And it's innocent. We can't get away from it because we breathe it. We gotta breathe air when we come out. We heard her say she was waiting for a call. I got a sister in the hospital now with cancer. I walked out to get a call just because they called it, so I'm, listening. My brother passed the cancer. I just saw a friend yesterday, told me he had cancer. I didn't even know he was sick. We can't get away from it. And the reason why is because every time it rains, it comes down in the soil. Then when it evaporates, it goes back up. So it's constantly up and down, up and down. Suggestion. Because the only way we can get away from it, because we can't, we are all older, seniors and whatnot, but our kids, grandkids, great grandkids, they have to come up in here if they're living around here. I suggest Marathon relocate everybody like they're trying to relocate the people over here across Shaker, because they can afford it. Because we can't live in it. It's constantly killing us. People who don't smoke, they might as well do everything that they can, because that's killing them too, slowly. But because it's legal, like you said, there's some stuff that y'all just can't stop. We ain't gonna have a say so in this. Y'all gonna go back, whoever is gonna make the decision, and they're just gonna expand. They ain't gonna stop that money from coming. And so, look, I don't mean to step on nobody's toes and get in their way. Some people can leave, but a lot of them can't. So them are the ones that has to deal with this.
Thank you for your comment. The next commenter I have is Simone Segovic, followed by Wanda Lowe Anderson.
Thank you. Yes, Simone Segovic from zip code 4209. I first wanted to state that sulfur dioxide has been in non-attainment status from 2013 to 2026 before we were brought into attainment in April of this year. That is a long time for the community to be breathing this air that exceeds health standards, like the established health standard by the EPA. So there's a lot of damage that can be done during that time. And the changes that are in these projects they show the potential to increase emissions of volatile organic compounds and nitrogen oxide emissions. Both contribute to the formation of ozone, which is highly damaging to health. And EGLE should require an ozone impact analysis and be required to deny if EGLE determines that the equipment would affect the attainment of ozone. The company says it could reduce reliance on trucks with these projects. We know that you can't regulate truck traffic, but if they're saying that it would reduce, they're putting out there as a reason that maybe it should be considered because they could reduce the trucks, then that should be included in the permit that gets signed with them voluntarily on their part. And the increase in emissions will impair the air. And according to Michigan EPA, that is a depletion and impairment of the air and natural resources. And EGLE can deny based on that as well. And just a final comment that even though we are in attainment for SO2, we know that the steel mills are not in full production and that could come back online. I haven't specifically heard or seen details of the attainment plan that shows how attainment will be maintained for SO2. So I have concerns that as soon as the steel mills start back up, we're going to have a problem again. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Last commenter that I have on the comment cards is Wanda Lowe Anderson.
Wanda Lowe Anderson, resident as well as a community organizer. Just wanted to comment on what can we do immediately that will have a mitigation effect or lessen the damage that is being done through the environmental emissions that we are experiencing. And I'm requesting that a green buffering with dense evergreen trees be planted in northern Boynton, which is the area where Marathon has purchased the homes. They have already planted trees over in Oakwood Heights. But as far as the comments that you've heard tonight from some of the people that live closer in northern Boynton area, which is over near Pleasant and Liddesdale, the reason why I'm requesting that a dense evergreen tree wall be planted because it captures particulate matter, PM 2.5 and PM 10. It reduces odors and VOC drift, blocks noise and visual blight, creates a physical separation between residents and refinery operations, as well as the planting of shrubs, which will get the lower portion of the emissions. And so I'm just requesting that green buffering, living walls, with certain trees that are known for absorbing the emissions and I can give you a list of those, but for time's sake, I will not. I'll put them in my comments and write it. Thank you.
Great, thank you for your comment. At this time, I don't have any more people listed on my comment. Natalie, do we have any commenters online? Okay. So yeah, we will take hands that if you'd like to comment next. If you want to come up front and then remember to state your name and any affiliation that you have, that would be great.
I'm Jacqueline Conley. I'm a member of the 4217 community. Long time, over 50 years, actually over 70. Well, you know, this has been very enlightening, very intellectually stimulating. I mean, the comments that have been made tonight are very much so on a high superior level. But what's sticking with me is all of this is a moot point. Because what you have said, what Andy has repeated more than once, we have got to get to the government legislators that make these laws. These rules and regulations that you guys have repeated several times that you must abide by. If they are falling within the guidelines of these rules and regulations, you must approve. And you've also said what we say here in opposition, which is everybody. Nobody wants it. It doesn't matter. We're just voicing our opinions, and that's a good thing. We need to do that. But there's got to be another way. We need from you, EGLE, a framework. Show us, tell us what legislators in government we need to contact that regulate this very thing that we're having this public hearing about, so that we can see exactly what are these rules that Marathon is very methodically and closely following so that they can get this permit. We need to know this. And to bring us here for public hearing comment, that's a good thing, like I said. All that material on the back tables, humongous. I took a little bit, but I mean, of course, we're not going to read that before we come up here and give comment. We don't even know what's in there. But we can get together as a community and contact the necessary people who will help us learn how to fight back in a legal way. Because what we're doing tonight is good, but it's a moot point. Nothing we're doing is going to change your mind, because they're going to make sure that they come within the framework of those rules and regulations. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment.
Hi. Once again, I'm just gonna say, I'm gonna talk the layman's term.
You could remember to name.
State your name and any affiliation you
Patricia
have.
Redding. Patricia Redding is my name. I'm gonna speak in layman's term. We came here, 99.9% knew that what we said was gonna make no difference. But we came to speak our mind. And to reiterate on what she said, and I just also went home, we have not one political representative here. The main one that should have been here was Gabrielle Union.
Tyrone Carter.
Well, Tyrone Carter, he does come when he can come. I'm going to speak up for him because he comes when he's supposed to go. But Gabrielle is our district council person, and she does not even come up here when she says she's going to come. 48217 is one of the oldest communities out in this area. I call it the forgotten community because we get the tail end of everything. And those statistics they have, they're not reflecting what we go through because their levels does not have anything to do with our levels because we are dealing with the worst polluted area, not only in Michigan, but I think it's the second in the United States of America. And so your statistics don't mean a thing to 48217 because none of the other communities that your rules are going by are not dealing with this. So to all of you, I'm against it only because we don't have enough facts that it might work, it might decrease. But if there had been a pilot program and we had proof that it would eliminate some of these emissions and all of the smell and everything, okay, I would have been a yes. But right now, I have to be a no because I have no facts or no facts about it being good. All I know is 48217, 48218, and 48229. We're not like the rest of the communities. And I have read up on it for years and years. I have asked, I have COPD, I was a letter carrier, I delivered mail out here. Don't you tell me that this air out here is good. Because before I started delivering mail, I didn't have asthma, I didn't have COPD, I didn't have any of that. So I'm going to say, I hope it works. I pray that it works because we are in this community. But we have to get on our elected officials to come up here and fight for us. All they want is our vote. After they get our vote, we don't see them. They don't come to these committees. When they get money, they don't come up here and say, this is for 48217. They throw it to 48229 in other communities. That 48209 gets the mission too, I have to say. But it's not only, we cannot fight for ourselves because your rules.
30 seconds left. Just
okay. Your rules are your rules, and you guys pass the admissions. I pass all qualifications. So build it. But we need facts afterwards that it's working. That's all I have to say.
Thank you for your comment. At this time, is there anybody else from the audience? Yes, I see a hand up there. Come on up. Sir.
Right here. My name is Al Bates.
Okay, let us bring the microphone over to you and then just to make sure that everybody can hear you. Okay, thank you.
My name is Al Bates. I'm a resident of 48217. I would like to know what EGLE has done. The last thing that EGLE has done to stop some polluters in the state of Michigan. Can you tell me that right now?
We're in the comment period, so we aren't able to respond to your question at this time.
Okay, but see, that's something that EGLE should be very proud of. When we're stopping polluters, and we can put that out there. the polluters are not afraid of EGLE. Okay, they must have some very strong lobbyists because they're stopping you guys in your tracks. You see where I'm going with this? Okay, you're not on this. Okay, I'm done.
Thank you for your comment.
Oh.
Is there anyone else that would like to make a comment? And I'm just gonna check in with Natalie too to see if there's anyone online, no one online that would like to make a comment. Just give everyone a couple minutes, a minute here to see if you want to make a comment. We still have some other ways to make a comment that if you don't want to make a comment tonight, that I'll go over in just a couple minutes. Okay, Chris, I'm not seeing any more comments. Are you okay if I close the hearing? Thank you. So I'm going to read a closing statement and then I'll go over a few other ways that you can still make a comment tonight. So thank you for taking your time to participate in this meeting tonight. We appreciate your interest in protecting Michigan's air quality. As indicated at the beginning of this hearing, the public comment period will close at midnight on June 11, 2026. All interested parties, anyone who provided comments during the public comment period, and anyone who attended this public hearing will be notified of the final decision on the proposed permits. The hearing is now closed. Thank you again. Okay, so I just want to quick cover a few other ways that you can still make an official comment if you decided you have more comments to make or you didn't want to make a comment tonight. So they are listed on the screen here. I'll leave it up so that you can take a picture if you would like to. So you can make a comment online in My Enviro portal, which is our online web platform, to make a comment directly in there. You can also send it in via postal mail to EGLE Air Quality Division Permit Section Manager. That's P.O. Box 30260, Lansing, Michigan, 48909 -7760. You can also send it in via email to EGLE-AQD-PTI public comments, that's all one word, at michigan.gov, or also by voicemail to 517-284-0900. All of the information that we have at the back there about the proposed project summary is listed in My Enviro portal as well. And you can also access that information at michigan.gov/EGLE Air Public Notice if you want to take a further look at that. So just as I mentioned, the information that we've got posted on those websites are the proposed project summary, the technical fact sheet, proposed permit terms and conditions, and then we'll also post a link to this recording since we did record this meeting tonight. And then the easiest way is to go to our public notice webpage listed here and then scroll down to actions open for comment. So if you still have a question after leaving tonight, you can contact any of our panelists. I've got their contact information listed here on the screen. And if they're not the correct person to answer that question that you have, they will send it over to the right person. So Andy might be the best person if you've got a general question, and you can reach him at drury@michigan.gov, 517-648-6663. And we will share out the slides to those who have attended as well, so you can have access to that contact information. So with that, we have reached the end of our evening here together. I want to thank everybody for being here, and I hope everyone, oh, yes, absolutely. Yep. Get the contact information picture up there. We'll leave it up. And then I think Chris has a couple of closing remarks that he'd like to make.
I just wanted to state I am available to talk or answer questions after the meeting too. So if you would like to chat more, I'll be here for a while. And thank you everyone for coming tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. And our P's number is listed at the bottom of the screen here too. I knew it was in the slide deck, so it is there. So again, thank you everybody, and I hope everyone has a safe night. Now you can go on and close the meeting.